So this week we have with us Ryan Cox. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Sure thing. Doing great. Maybe we can start with just like a quick intro from yourself. Anything about
Yeah,
yourself? Yeah.
yeah, definitely. So my name is Ryan Cox. I'm currently working as a senior security operations engineer at a SaaS company called Revinate. It's in the hospitality space. And then I also run a newsletter, which I think is how you guys probably found me, called the CyberSec Cafe, over on Substack. And then, outside of cybersecurity, I enjoy building my own products. And then outside of cybersecurity, I just like to stay active, play sports, golf, tennis, basketball, you name it. But yeah, that's a quick intro on me.
Awesome, awesome. And I think you wanted to talk about something you kind of said like the two keywords that come to my heart, which was like, security and then scaling. So
Mhm.
I'm super curious about what your take, what your experience, like your thoughts. Go for it.
Yeah, definitely. It's something I've thought about a lot lately. So at this company I'm at currently, I was brought on to kind of lead the building of the security operations function. And at a high level, I think that's mostly going to be your detection engineering, your incident response, your SOC, and then kind of it's really an umbrella of things. And coming on and kind of being, I guess, at ground zero, it gave me a lot of time to think about in my career what's worked and what hasn't, and try to come up with ideas to create scalable processes for a very very lean team. We're currently growing, but it's still going to be under 5 people, 3 engineers, so very lean. So you really have to um, make sure your processes are scalable. And I know it's kind of an umbrella term, but yeah, just thinking about the little things and things that can make everyone's life easier, no matter what part of SecOps you're talking about. But today in particular, I did want to talk mostly about the detection lifecycle and the incident response, because I think those are probably the key pillars of SecOps. Sorry, let me get some water here.
Yeah, with a team of five, scaling is important. It's lean and mean.
Definitely. Yeah. And I came from a team of, I think, 12 security engineers before, but only two of us were in detection response. So that kind of set the stage. But now rebuilding, I get to kind of have my way with it and build it how I see fit, which is a really cool experience. But I think the detection lifecycle always starts with your SOC. Those are going to be the people who are triaging your tickets every day. They're really kind of in the weeds of what's happening. And one thing that I like to do there is with my run books, with my tickets that come in, is just having quick links. That's a easy low hanging fruit. Quick links to save queries, quick links to dashboards, whatever it is. When the ticket comes in, I click a button, automatically put that username in. I can search right away. So you're getting all of your insights you need, just from the click of a button. And then from there, I mean, you could do store automations on top of that, but where we are right now, we're not quite there yet. So I think, making it as easy as frictionless as possible is really step number one for those guys in the SOC. And then moving from there, since they're always kind of in the weeds of your tickets, of your detections, they're going to understand your environment from a more practical perspective rather than just an analytical perspective. So um, I think having ways to, for them to easily submit and track exceptions, detection requests, that's really key. And for the detection engineers, when those come in, to easily take action on that. So that can be literally as simple as like a form. But my thing is it cannot be just Slack messages. Those are going to get lost really, really easily. So just really facilitating those requests coming in and tracking them as they're getting implemented. Um, and
So
then,
that means you have the people doing the triage. Essentially, I'm thinking of this like level one kind of thing.
Mhm.
are different than the people customizing the detections and all of that. That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's like a lot of shared responsibility, I would say, but we do have some people whose key responsibility is just triaging tickets. But as a detection engineer, too, I think it's very, very important to still be looking at those tickets and understanding, um, why are things true positives? Why are they false positives? All the above. Yeah.
Yeah, the context is pretty critical here, right?
Definitely. Definitely. And I think, I've been a culprit of this myself in with detection engineering, only looking at the analytics. But I think um, there's also something to be said about anecdotal experiences triaging these tickets. So yeah, that's why I like to have those requests coming in straight from those people. Um, but then from there is the actual detection creation method. And I wrote a blog article about this recently, my creative workflow for creating detections. But it all kind of stems back to detections as code. And that's something I've been fortunate to have in the last two sims I've worked with, being Panther and Datadog now. Um, but it's something I think it's becoming more prevalent in the industry and something that's being more widely adopted across sims. But not something I think that enough security teams are implementing because of that friction for implementation. Um, and sometimes it takes a DevOps person to come in and help, but I think it's very important in the long run because of the benefits that are kind of built into as code. And that's you get your version control, you get a formal review and approval process. And then with code, you're getting consistency across the code base. And then one thing I love is your exception management through code. This is something again I wrote about a year ago now about exceptions as code um, in your workflow, and it just makes it so much easier to manage service accounts, highly privileged users all in one area, and just import easily across detections. So I think that is one thing that I'm starting to see now more in documentation, but even just a year ago, I wasn't seeing very often.
Yeah, I feel like that the bar for security, not security, detection as code has really come down quite a bit.
Hmm.
And I think you hit on it, in my opinion, two of the kind of the core critical things, two of the three. So you talked about the like the detection itself, and yeah, obviously detection as code, the detection. There's the false positives. I think just because of the days of pre-detection as code, a lot of people think of those two things as together. But I mean, in my experience, and I think that's where you were as well, like there's a ton of value in decoupling those because if you have to, have 100 different, unique exceptions into your detection, it gets really tricky to manage at scale. And I know, like, we work with a ton of MSSPs and MDRs that do that across, thousands of tenants. So it
Hmm.
gets so much worse. I'm curious about the last one. If you have experience doing that or what you think, and in my head it's the idea of testing. So it's obviously like historically we've had like a thing called like replay where you replay a role in historical data. uh Plug to Eric at Black Hills that did something super awesome. His He did like a whole page that kind of streamlines all the engineering, but importantly, it kind of couples into that the historical lookup of those detections, right? Of saying, hey, this detection that's cool, it looks great, it was approved, but would it have triggered 100,000 false positives in the last week or none at all? And like I feel like that becomes super valuable as you're trying to get that flywheel of detections going. Is that something that you guys like play with or thoughts?
It is. It's something that also is built into Datadog, which is the sim I'm using now. Is you can run those historical runs and see what triggers. Because, maybe you missed something that now is a critical and you want to go back 2 months and make sure nothing ran. And you can also have threat hunters that look for that stuff, but that's also going to be something that a more mature team is going to have the time for and the people for. So yeah, like you said, running on that historical data, the replay is very valuable too. Um, and even in detection as code, as you're deploying, it makes it a lot easier to automate your testing for uh, a true case, and then a false case, and then also those edge cases. Make sure your logic's correct too, which I think is really valuable.
Love it, love it.
Yeah.
It makes me happy to hear somebody that's like, hey, we're a really small team. We're starting from, from the ground up, and right off the bat, this is obviously the way, because I
Mhm.
think that's absolutely true. Now, the starting from the ground up is kind of an important asterisk, I think, for a lot of people. It's a, I'm sure it's a pretty exciting challenge for you to
Oh,
go and do that,
definitely.
right?
I think it's also the topic of tech debt in the sense of what's the easy solution now versus what's the best solution now, and what problems are you going to create for yourself later if you take that band-aid solution rather than fighting that friction at the beginning and making the harder decision now so that you can benefit later. And I think there's a balance there because sometimes you're forced to move fast and make that easy decision because you just need this in place, but then you're going to create a lot of work for yourself on the back end if you continuously do that over and over and over.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I see Justin in the chat kind of put the, I guess it's the fourth pillar in a way, I think, of like, hey, yes, that's cool, but then how do you validate alerts? That I found to be exponentially harder. Are you guys, have you found a way to do it? Are you doing it? Do you have thoughts on how you do it, like running Atomic Red Team or something like that?
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. Right now, it's really gonna be a lot of manual effort. So that is something I also want to talk about is I guess your tuning or your validation workflow. And one thing I like to do is just when you have detections that are fresh, it's just a regular review, right? So say I want to see how it's performing after 2 weeks, after a month, just since it's so new, but then again in a quarter, and making sure that the numbers are pointing to that actually being valuable and not just being noise. Because I think that kind of got me thinking of, there are a lot of times where as you're building out your detection suite, you're like, oh, this is going to be a really good detection. This is going to find uh, that malicious activity. And then you realize, this is just noise. Every single time this comes in, it's just annoying. Yeah, exactly. Continuous testing. So yeah, I think, and again, another thing I touch on my blog a lot is everything's iterative. You have to keep going back. You have to keep tuning, adding exceptions, checking on those things that you're adding. It's really just an iterative life cycle when it comes down to it, much like software development and everything kind of in this space.
Yeah, especially like, so you mentioned tuning. It gets tricky. I think historically a challenge I've seen or experienced is when you're tuning, let's say you get, false positive, and it becomes a question of, how tight, how granular or coarse do you make that false positive on that particular exception? I
Mhm.
feel like there's probably no good answer, but do you have do you have a gut take on usually how you think about it?
Yeah, for me, it's always granularity. So I have kind of my philosophy is I want to see it at first to make sure we're catching it, and then I make the scope smaller and smaller as I gain more confidence in the logic of the detection. So in my eyes, I'd rather have a lot of noise at first, and then shorten that down as I get a better understanding of how that detection is performing.
That feels very wise.
Yeah. I think that's just the logical way to look at it.
For sure, for sure. Um,
Mhm.
Sorry, I feel like I took it a little bit sideways. Like
No,
there,
no, no
did you
worries.
have? Do you want to keep going? Did you have something more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm my main thing is number one, just iteration, and then number two is really just finding a process that works for your team. I think especially with the detection life cycle, depending on where you are in the org, it's going to look very different. Um, you know, for a very small team like mine, I think it's going to be a lot of hack together solutions. Whereas if you're more mature and say you have a dedicated team of 20, 30 engineers, if you're at a big organization, then it's going to look way different than hacking together forms and Jira tickets and basically you're forced to work with what you have, whereas you have more freedom to purchase tools that directly solve your problems later on.
True. There's also a weird counter, like counter concept to that. I think somebody put it earlier in the chat, like, oh yeah, nothing's more permanent than temporary solution, right? And so I feel like the pattern is often the small team has a chance to build the things the right way, and they start and they do, but then at some point it's like you stumble and you do these hacks, and you found yourself 5 years later in a much bigger team that should be more mature, but in practice it's pervasive with all of these like weird kind of like corner cases.
Mhm.
Do you have plans and like how you think to tackle that as you guys grow?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen that, right? Where you're in a situation where someone's like, "Hey, I really need to make this, whether it be like an exception or make this temporary rule for me. I just need this to work right now, and I'll go back and fix it later." Uh, and in the back of your head that that's never getting fixed later. If it works for a lot of people, especially when you're like collaborating with engineering teams or product teams, like all that they care about is it works. So yeah, in the back of your head that it's never going to get fixed. But in terms of tackling it as we move forward, um, yeah, I think that's really just about taking time, maybe every quarter, every 2 quarters, to evaluate what your strategy is and make sure you're continuously making those correct decisions. Otherwise, yeah, it's just going to be a spiral out of control at some point.
Yeah, and I think the auditing part of that is also pretty important. However, like meaning like hey, we need to launch this product tomorrow. We didn't think we needed that exception, but we do. Can you just put it in? The typical thing is like 5 years later, you look and it's still there. And
Mhm.
so the benefit, at least of having it as code, is you don't have like snowflake policies that you don't even know where they are, but there's still that permanence. I wonder on the effectiveness of doing more automated processes, like putting a TTL on an
Mhm.
exception, like a machine enforced time to live, so that or an expiry essentially, right? So that you can talk to that team and say, you only need this for the next month. Yes, we will give this to you for the next month, but if nobody does nothing, it just like kicks back in, right? I feel like
Mhm.
you kind of have to try to get as many of those machine centric processes going, because otherwise, if it's a calendar reminder, it's not going to
Yeah,
work out, right?
it's going to fall by the wayside really quick. And I've actually kind of seen away from the detections example, but I've seen this kind of case happen with email, specifically DMARC enforcement, and saying, "Hey, we need to write this exception, so this mail is getting through right now. We need it." And I'm talking about ingress at our email gateway. I need this now. Can we just write an exception? We'll fix it later. And yeah, never getting fixed later. And then eventually, no one's going to document it, and it's just going to fall by the wayside as people start to leave. And then someone in 2, 3 years is going to say, what is this exception?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
I had a supervisor back at Google that I thought, like, that was the nugget of like wisdom that I got from him, which was, if you can make a system so that there's no way for a human to make a change into it, that's the best.
Mhm.
The only way to configure the system is through this repo and source control. you make sure scientifically that nobody's ever going to go and I logged in over SSH in that firewall or that mail gateway and did the thing,
That's really good advice, honestly.
right?
I'll take
Harder
that
to
away
work
from this conversation too.
yeah. So what's been the big challenges for you guys as you've grown? I mean, obviously, I'm sure the smaller team has been a challenge in and of itself, but is there anything else that, maybe is not obvious for people from the outside?
I think one of the main challenges is the actual building process, and something I actually wanted to touch on next, which is the IR process. And I think having freedom of designing how that's going to work and how you actually want to tackle it is kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time. Um, First of all, because you're again kind of using the tools that you have at your disposal, which I think you can get pretty far with. We use something as simple as a Google Doc, and I think that has its benefits over using Jira for task tracking, especially in an incident. To me, it's not lightweight enough, and you don't want to be fooling around with tech and that kind of thing during an incident. And then also just the added benefit of creating timelines, tracking artifacts, all within a doc where you can kind of just go to where you need right when you need it is really nice. But then it comes back to, is this scalable? And if you've ever worked in a massive Google Doc, once it gets to 50 pages, it's kind of hard to find what you're looking for. Um, so that's definitely one of the struggles is, how do you create a budget friendly process that scales? And I think, yeah, that I think is our number one challenge right now is you have these requirements for a small team. You don't want it to be too expensive, but you need it to be super, super flexible and lightweight during an incident. So yeah, designing that around Google Sheets, Google Docs is a challenge, but making it work so far.
Yeah, I mean, like I've never been in like in a company doing IR, so like it's done outside of government, and but perhaps my naive, like where am I wrong when I say if I say, yeah, but does IR need to scale beyond the incident? Right? Meaning, let's say you go through an incident and you document things and a spreadsheet just it works for that incident. How much long lasting like scaling process through time do you need? Or am I right or completely wrong or
Yeah, I would say for me, the IR process, it doesn't necessarily need to scale, but where I think you can really benefit from having tooling is number one, like your analytics of tracking root cause over time. And then for me, a big thing is the postmortem and the improvement items that come out of that and tying them back to the meter attack framework and really understanding now your footprint from both your detection side and your incident side, right? If I have a lot of meter covered in my detection, but then all my incidents are coming through in another tactic, then maybe I got to really bolster my coverage on that tactic now. And then yeah, just understanding I think just the uh, small analytics and yeah, really like having a productive post-mortem conversation because I think one of the things that I like to do is I have a set matrix of questions that I ask in every post-mortem, and it's about 20 questions, and it'll take an hour or so to get through it. But then over time, you're going to start tracking you know where's something that needs improvement the most. Is that something consistent across incidents, or is that something that is kind of up and down, and just seeing these patterns is I think where uh, maybe incident response kind of falls short in some sense. I do know there are incident response uh, products out there, but they're not always tailored towards security. They're tailored towards infrastructure outages and things like that. But And not to be said, I know there's a few out there too that are tailored towards security teams, but um, yeah, I think having it from both the incident and the postmortem perspective uh, would give you um, a more holistic view of what's going on with your organization.
That's a really good point. I think when I think IR, I go to the very tactical right away, and I think probably a lot of folks do that, and a lot of tools do that. Um, so yeah, being able to roll that up, and especially in an enterprise, right? I suspect that if you're doing IR as part of like MDR type of business, then it's a very different type of scaling or kind of like historical knowledge. And you know what? I'm gonna go on a limb and like it feels like Google spreadsheets or things like that for those requirements, it's probably not a bad solution, especially given a lot of the ways that AI can kind of consume data now. It's probably going to be a good way, like a good source for you to be able to go like once a year, like give me some some report, distill all of this, even though it's not in like machine readable, perfect like format kind of thing.
hmm and again, it's something quick and people know how to use it, so there's less friction there too.
That's right. The best solution is the one that people will use. Uh,
Exactly, exactly. And that's another thing is you can buy tools, but that doesn't mean anyone's going to use them. Um, it's really about buy-in too from the team. And again, coming back to whatever works for your team, that's the solution you got to go with.
Very good. And on these words of wisdom, thanks so much for coming in. That was super interesting. If folks want to get in touch with you to chat, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I believe it's Ryan-G-C. And then Twitter, I'm Ryan G Cox _. And then again, my newsletter, cyberseccafe.com.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for coming in.
Cool.
And
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really
yeah,
enjoyed this conversation.
awesome. Thanks everybody. We'll see you next Friday for Defender Fridays.